I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. I've crossed the deserts bare, man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. Of travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. Hey, you want to get yourself into a road trip mood? Go listen to Johnny Cash's I've Been Everywhere. It's a great song. Welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host, man. This is a show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement. We want you to rock retirement, man. And this month on the show, we are exploring the RV virus, the desire to hit the open road in an RV in retirement. And this is week 2, so go back to week 1 in March if you want to start from the beginning. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to explore the cost of this RV virus and what it costs to actually hit the road, man. And then we're going to have another conversation with people that are doing it right now to get some of their perspective to maybe give you some tips and some guidance. So if you want to hit the road, man, you can do it in the right way and really rock retirement. But we can't do any of that until we have that all-important disclaimer. Real easy here. Let's not take advice from me on the show. Before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. I only give advice to clients who I know well enough to act as a fiduciary and help them on their way. So until you and I chat about that, helpful hints and education. With that, let's go talk about what the true cost of owning an RV and hitting the road, man, is in the Hot Topic segment. So in the Hot Topic segment today, I want to discuss the cost of succumbing to this RV virus. As we said, if you can let this virus go full out, and it can be a great thing for your go-go years, but we're going to want to be intentional about what you spend on it so you don't get a little over your skis, as they say. And so what I thought I'd do is just review the most popular classes of RVs real quickly. This is just going to be a real high level so we understand what some of the basic options are, and then give you some tips on how to begin this journey of being more intentional as you work through what you want to buy and what you want to test out. So we're just going to go over this on a high level, and then we're going to hear from someone actually doing it here in the practical planning segment. So when you go to your first RV show, which is a great thing to do, by the way, because you're going to get everything. The RV shows like the Cheesecake Factory of RVs. You're going to have everything on the menu there of all the classes that we're going to talk about. It's a great place to go just to do some recon on what is available and what you might want and what you might not. So RV shows, I think, are great, and we'll talk about that in tips here in a little bit. So what are the basic classes of RVs? We'll start at the top, which is Class A. These are those big honking RVs, usually with flat fronts that you see on the road that are usually pulling an Escalade or something huge. They are very expensive. I mean, they can go from low end 100 to the millions, literally. They can be as long as 45 feet. They're going to have large interior spaces. There's going to be a ton of cargo space, amenities to whatever you can imagine. You know, some of the downsides, they can be pretty intimidating. They're going to be really expensive. And you're going to end up having to tow a car or have an e-bike or something if you want to get around. So these are those big Class A. So these are the big daddies for the serious RVers that want to take really a small house with you anywhere. Now, Class B isn't really the next step down in size. These are what we think of as camper vans. Now, they're basically recreational vehicles built on a van-like chassis. The amenities are going to be limited. You're not going to have a full-size refrigerator like the Class A or a stove. Everything is going to be miniaturized. The living space is typically a lot smaller in a Class B, but they're going to be a lot less costly to fuel and maintain. They're going to be a lot easier to drive than the Class A for sure. And there's going to be a very simple setup and takedown. So these are, if you're lean and mean, it's just you and your wife and you're comfortable in cramped corners and you want something that is actually still comfortable in driving around town in, this might be a good option. Doesn't mean they're going to be super inexpensive. None of these things necessarily are. So that's a Class B. Now, a Class C is what we think of as like a mid-sized recreational vehicle. 20 to 30 feet. They're usually built on a truck chassis. And these are what you will normally see on the road if you see a family on an RV trip. So there's a lot of room from sleeping quarters, a lot of multi-purpose areas. So you could fit family and extra sleeping. It's going to be self-contained for the most part, meaning it's going to have its own sewage reservoir, water. There'll be probably a downsized refrigerator or miniaturized kitchen of sorts. It's a lot easier to drive than a Class A, but not as easy to drive, say, as a Class B, the van types. So these are going to be the most prevalent ones you'll probably see in the ones that the vehicle's integrated with the camper part of it, where you would have to drive it around. And we'll get to that in a second. Now, probably the second most popular, second most one you'll see on the road are just those towable RVs. This is what we have. This is just a trailer, a travel trailer that hooks to the hitch that is on, any expedition or car. And these can run the gamut range-wise of size, but they're going to be really easy. Just hook it to the back of the hitch. A lot less expensive than a motorhome that has the vehicle part integrated in. So you'd be towing this. May be a little bit more difficult to maneuver because you got to deal with the trailer going back and forth. You're going to have sway on the trailer because it's separate from your vehicle. And it's going to be hard if you're backing up. Trust me, I've tried it over and over and over again. But it's a lot less expensive if you want something you can just pull. And the nice thing about that is that when you reach your camping destination and you set up your travel trailer, well, now you still have a vehicle to be able to get around town in. So there is that. If you go to the Class A or the Class C especially, and I think Scott, in one of our conversations this month, makes this comment, you're going to end up towing something because you may want to have a vehicle to be able to drive around. So why not just tow the trailer? Now, one advantage of these towable RVs, and we're talking about the travel trailer here, the second kind we'll talk about in a second, the fifth wheeler. One nice thing about these from a maintenance standpoint, they can be a little easier on the budget maintenance-wise. It's still going to have maybe a generator, electrical, things like that. So things can still go wrong. But because the vehicle isn't integrated into the camper portion, it can be a little less from a maintenance standpoint. And in the event that you have to take it to maintenance, you don't lose your whole mobility because you'll still have the car that towed it. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about are the fifth wheelers, which are a towable RV, like the normal travel trailer. The difference is they're generally going to be bigger and they have what's called a gooseneck connector. So rather than connect to a hitch on the back of your pickup truck, it's going to actually connect to the pickup truck bed. So it's not something you could pull with, say, a Jeep Cherokee or an Expedition or something like that. It's a much better and more solid connection than the normal kind of trailer. It's going to provide you more space than the normal kind of trailer, and it can have more modern conveniences because it's a much bigger trailer to pull. But you're going to be limited to, the kind of vehicle you have. You're basically going to have a pickup. So these are the types of classes that you can have, and the prices range from all over the place. And we didn't even talk about pop-ups. A pop-up trailer, which is a super simple one, and we hear some discussions in the conversations that we had with people this week, and you'll hear them on the show, where the pop-up is like the gateway drug to the RV virus. It's a great first step because if you buy them right, you can almost get your money out of them and start to learn what it is that you want as you go up and find the kind of class of trailer. So let's talk about some costs. And for this, I went to camperreport.com, and they have a pricing guide, average RV costs with 19 examples. So you can find that, and I can put a link in the Six Shot Saturday if Nicole reminds me. But let's just look at like a Class A, and I'm just going to randomly look at here. Here's a Class A motorhome, Forest River, Berkshire XLT diesel. That's $280,000 plus. Now, if we go to a Class C motorhome, this is a Coachman Leprechaun. about 67, 68,000 plus. So you're talking some real money. Now you would think like a fifth wheel, well, it doesn't have the vehicle there. It could be a lot less. It could be, but here's a Dutchman Astoria fifth wheel for 50,000. But what about those Class B, those sort of van chassis ones that are really easy to drive? It's built on a van chassis. It should be fairly inexpensive, right? Well, not necessarily. The Thor Motor Coach Compass is $114,000. So smaller doesn't necessarily mean cheaper. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you can look at camper trailers of various sizes that can be 13,000, 11,000 to, 20, 30, 40,000. So you can see the kind of range, and it's all going to end up being trade-offs of size, quality of build, and type of vehicle, whether it's an integrated, whether it's a fifth wheel, or whether it's a trailer hitch pull. The trailer hitch pull ones tend to be the least expensive. So I think this is why you need to do your research. So how do you go about doing your research? Well, actually, before we do that, let's talk about additional costs so we can have a better understanding. Got a travel trailer? Well, you may have to store it when you're not using it. That can be anywhere from $50 to $500 per month, depending on where you live. So you're looking at a couple thousand just for storage for where it's going to be. You think about gas mileage. A Class A type of trailer, it's going to get 5 to 8 miles a gallon? That's highway, not assuming you're going up mountains or things like that. So gas is going to be a lot more expensive on certain models. If you go the trailer route, sure, it's less expensive, but then you're going to have a vehicle to pull it. In the case of a fifth wheeler, you're going to have a pickup to pull it. And pickup trucks are not cheap. They can easily go into the 40, 50, 60, 70, 80,000 on up range. You're going to have maintenance. The quality of build, and a few people point this out in our conversations, are not like a house. Quality of build is not the same. Things will break. It gets jostled around. And that's something you need to take into account as part of this RV lifestyle is I'm going to have repair costs on this. You're going to have upgrades. We talked to Scott. I think it's on this episode. I can't remember off the top of my head. Who installs solar panels, adds extras, things like that. If you have a vehicle that is integrated with your car, where they're together, Class A or Class B or C, you may want to have a vehicle that you bring with you to get around town. So that could be towing a vehicle. That could be purchasing an electric bicycle, which are awesome, by the way. But those can range at, a couple thousand each. So there are a lot of different additional costs that sometimes we don't think of when we're succumbing to the virus. And then you have campground fees, which can be anywhere from $0 to $40, $50 a night. And then obviously your food and everything else. So I'm going to end this portion with some just general tips that make sense regardless of where you're at on this RV journey. Number one is, I told you before, I think it makes sense to go to RV shows and start to get an understanding of what is available so you can get an idea of where you think you might want to start from an RV size standpoint. In one of the episodes, we have a great couple, Howard and Linda, who have rv-dreams.com, who was very important in his journey because they left and went on RV full-time younger, and they share a lot of the detailed analysis. It's a great resource, I think, to go start to learn from a cost perspective and logistic perspective. So that's rv-dreams.com. I think another tip is to take your time. This is not something you want to rush into and get a romantic bug, be at an RV show, start letting someone cast the dream and talk you into easy payments for something that you may never use. Now, I know that's not you, but that is a lot of people. Very similar to exercise equipment. It's very easy to romanticize these type of things. So take your time. Relax. New is great. We have a few of the stories we're telling this month that were bought new, but we have a number that bought used as well. Both work depending on your due diligence. One option here is, and I've never used this service, but I found it, and there are others like it, But just as an example, there are VRBOs for homes, there are sharing platforms for RVs. Who knew? So if you are going to plop down a lot of money to purchase, say, a Class A or Class B or C or whatever, it might make sense to go test them. Drive around in one or two. Maybe you'll find a model that you enjoy, or maybe you find one you don't. I was perusing RV Share, and then I just randomly put in, okay, if I want to go for a month in May, and I want to rent a, say, Class A. So here's when I rented. It's Amelia, family-friendly Class A, bunkhouse, sleeps 8. You can do that for a month for about $8,100. That seems expensive. I can rent a house in Colorado for half that. But if you're going to spend a couple $100,000 in an RV, you're spending $235 a night for a Class A to check it out, feel if you're comfortable driving it, might be worth the money. Now, I went to a Class B, a Mercedes 4x4 Sprinter, which are really cool, by the way. I would love one of these, but they're over $100,000. You can rent one of those when I priced it on an RV for a month for about $6,400. Again, this is over $100,000 purchase. It might be worth testing it out before you finance something like that. A Class C, which is the more normal trailer that we see, you can rent those for between $5,000 and $6,000 or $7,000, depending on the size. They vary in size greatly. A fifth wheel with a toy hauler, you can rent for a month for about $4,600 in my little unscientific test. So something like an RV Share, and again, I've never used that service, but something like that, I think is a good gateway to explore and shoot bullets, as Jim Collins says, little bullets to calibrate what it is you're looking for before you shoot a big cannonball and plop down a lot of money. And then the last thing I think you need to consider when you're pursuing this is how exactly are you going to pay for it? Spending $100,000 cash right at retirement because you don't want to finance it could make sense for you, but it might not. Because what if all of your assets are in a tax-deferred account? What if really all your liquid assets are in an IRA or a 401k? Do you really want to take out $100,000 all at once in addition to normal living and shoot yourself up the tax brackets? Is this something that you finance potentially and pay off strategically in a quick way, but so you can stagger the money that you're taking out potentially from tax-deferred accounts? Is this something that you start testing well before retirement so you can plan how you're actually going to purchase it, either by saving up the money in a virtual envelope or figuring out a strategic financing way so you can make sure you draw the money out from your accounts in a tax-efficient manner? And again, I'm not a fan of financing these type of things because they're depreciating assets. And there's plenty of people that will finance them for, I don't know, I think 30 years. Looks like a house. And your payment will be next to nothing. I've seen the other end of that, of people that have succumbed to the RV virus, not in a healthy way, bought the dream that they romanticized about, never really used it, ended up being very upside down and saddled with payments for years in something that it was too painful to sell. So they ended up paying storage, insurance, the mortgage payments, and either never used it or never were able to use it because life threw them a curveball. You want to take this slowly so you can do it right, and you'll enjoy yourself more if you do. And with that, let's go have a conversation with someone who has done this successfully. So this week, I was right. We are talking with Scott, Scott is great. When he came through with his wife on one of their RV trips, they came through Dallas-Fort Worth. We actually were able to sit and have some coffee, and he has some wonderful tips on how to manage this RV virus to your benefit. So let's have a conversation with Scott. I guess the first place to start, Scott, is how long have the two of you been in an RV or traveling using an RV?
Well, we started the full-time adventure in August of 2017.
Okay.
Started it Yeah, about a year and a half now.
And prior to that, how many times had you traveled in an RV?
We had traveled, well, I guess I'd go back the 2 preceding years. We knew we were going to do this when I retired. And so we started out with what I call our trainer camper, which is a little pop-up camper. We were living in Pennsylvania at the time. And we took that on probably 8 or 9 long weekend trips, and then a 2-week trip to the Midwest and back. And then after having that for a year, we upgraded to a used travel trailer and did, again, over the next course of a year, about 7 or 8 long weekend trips. And we actually started full-timing in a travel trailer, a 20-footer, for about 3 months, knowing that we were going to get a bigger rig at some point. But we couldn't wait. We just said, this is fine to start out with. And we headed off towards Maine and New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island. And October of 17, we upgraded to a brand new 5th wheel.
And so what was the pull? Because you're almost full-time now, or
right.
So what was the pull to want to do this?
The desire.
There you go.
You go back about 4.5 years. And really, you can go back to right after we got married over 30 years ago. I remember on a week after we got married, my wife and I were driving from the Midwest to Alabama, where I was stationed. And she saw a big bus-style RV. She says, I want to do that one day. And that conversation came up for the next 25 years. And I was not that thrilled with the idea. And eventually, 4.5 years ago, she put her foot down and said, about a month before her birthday, she said, you're going to go rent an RV for my birthday and take me camping. I said, okay. And I was, again, reluctant about this whole RV thing because I didn't know much about it. And Roger, believe it or not, after that first trip, I was hooked. And that started the bug, the virus, as you call it.
Yeah. So what was it about that trip that hooked you?
Well, I'll start with what was giving me the apprehension to start it. And that was, I didn't know enough about RVs. I thought I'd read a little bit about them. I thought they were expensive, which is not true necessarily. You can buy really expensive ones, but it's not necessarily true. And my only experience with RVs was driving along the highway and seeing a really tightly packed campground with a bunch of RVs side by side. And that just didn't appeal to me.
Right next to the highway, right?
Right next to the highway. It's like, what's the desire in that? Well, before we actually went on this trip, I decided that I didn't want to go to a campground. I wanted to go what I just described. I wanted to go to an out of the woods type camping area. And before we actually left, I learned about this term called boondocking, and that is going out into the boondocks and getting out in the woods and getting close to nature. Because we like to hike, we like to get out in the nature. I like to fish. And we actually went to an undefined boondocking site in George Washington National Forest in Western Virginia on the edge of West Virginia. And it was a beautiful experience. And the whole idea of you're self-contained, you have at that time most of the comforts of home in the woods in the middle of nowhere, and I can walk down to a trout stream in a just beautiful, beautiful environment. And that's part of it.
So let's talk about boondocking.
Sure.
So that means that you're not hooked up to electricity, you're not hooked up to sewage, you're not hooked up to water.
Right.
You're basically just driving out into a field by yourself and plopping down.
Right. Some people also call it dry camping. And in fact, if you go to a national or state park, they might refer to it as primitive or dry camping, but those that do this quite a bit call it boondocking. And you're just relying on what you have on board, all your systems on board.
Meaning generator, water tank, the sewage tank that you fill up and...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. And it may be a generator, or like we've just actually had our generator removed before Christmas and installed solar panels and a pretty significant size lithium battery bank. We just spent the last 2 days in a state park near Houston, completely disconnected from everything. And it was a good test. It was a cloudy day too, and the batteries went fine, and we could have gone another 4 or 5 days.
It makes me think of when I was in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia last year, and we were visiting with a nomadic family, and they had their gur, which is a big yurt. Family of 4 lived there. You walk into the yurt, and you got this old ancient Russian rifle that was passed down. And right next to this old ancient Russian rifle was like a 36-inch TV. And they had solar panels with the batteries. And that's how they did it in the desert.
It's and satellite TV, obviously.
Yeah.
So they're connected to whatever they want to watch.
They were boondocking as a lifestyle, basically.
Right.
And that's what they do now. Okay. So is it easy to find those kind of places?
It takes a little bit of work, but luckily there are a number of resources on the internet that help you find those places. Freecampsites.net is a good one. Campendium.com is another one, but there are a variety of places that you can go hunt and peck and find some really good sites.
And the idea is, one, you get to be truly more in nature rather than in a roaming neighborhood of sorts.
Right.
So you get to truly be in nature, and it's not as expensive, I would imagine, from at least campsite type of setup where it's $40, to $100 a night.
Sure. I mean, the state park we paid, I think, $25 a night, but we could have had access to all those resources. But this was kind of a test run since we just upgraded to the solar and the lithium. But we are leaving here to head towards Taos, New Mexico. I guess it's the start of March here in about 2 weeks. And our plan is to go to Bureau of Land Management sites that are defined, authorized camping parking locations. But it's, I believe, free for most of them. And a couple of you have to pay maybe $10 or $12 a night. And they've got a place to park. They got a fire ring there, and some have a picnic table. But in many cases, it's just a place off the road in either the National Forest or Bureau of Land Management land. And for most of those places, you don't have to pay anything. You just have to have, I think you can stay no more than 14 days at one particular spot. And then you have to move at least, I believe, it varies by the agency that controls the land. Somewhere are like 50 miles, some are 35 miles. And I think some are very along those lines. We have to move to a new location.
Okay. So you have a fifth wheel,
yep.
Right? So when you set up camp, you have your truck to be able to drive around mobile. What kind of gear do you keep with you? I know some people that just bought electric bikes. I'm sure kayaking is an activity. What kind of gear do you keep in something?
We have 2 electric bikes. I have a 2-person inflatable raft that has a steel frame that you can mount a trolling motor on, and 2 swivel boat seats. So I've got actual cushioned boat seats that you would see in a normal bass boat. What else do we have? Boy, we have a Weber small grill. I've got tools. I've got a Dremel. Those are the things that we drag around. I have a spare little generator that we will have it for an emergency case, even though we pulled out the big installed generator that I described a few minutes ago. I mean, those are the things that we add on. In the RV itself, we've got a residential refrigerator. We've got a 4-burner apartment style stove. We've got a microwave. We've got a 50-inch TV in the living room. We've got a 30-inch TV in the bedroom. We have a 30-inch TV on the outside, which
holy cow! This is a fifth wheel?
This is the fifth wheel. And
so how many square foot is your living area, would you say?
I'm trying to remember I think we figured it out. It's about 270 square feet. Okay. So it sounds small, but it is actually bigger than it sounds on when you hear somebody describe it.
So you're full-time now. Right. What was your house square foot?
Well, we transitioned. When we made this decision, we were living in a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2,800 square foot house. The military moved me 2 years before I retired. And we knew at that point that we were going to do this. And so we took the opportunity to downsize and rented a 1,100 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, going down to, less than half the size before. And at that point, we realized we don't need this much space. And we didn't think that moving into an RV was going to be that much of a challenge at all. And it wasn't. But that first transition step of downsizing really helped us make the mental transition that we could do this.
Yeah. And being that you're in the service, you were a little bit more accustomed to not having firm roots just because of the career.
Correct.
Yeah. So that definitely helps. I live in a house, and it's, it's just my wife and I now. I guess my son just moved back home, but, we're in the middle of decluttering. But it's hard because you think you need a lot of stuff. Do you miss any of the stuff that you didn't have in those places?
First of all, I got to be honest, we have a storage unit because there's some heirloom items.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Things that we want to keep, things that we collected during our time, but it's not a big storage unit. So we have some things that we still have possession of, but I don't miss those things. Now, I know that I've got those items in a place I could go look at them if I wanted to, but I certainly don't miss them. We're ready to go back and have a big giant garage sale when we get back. But before we did make the transition from the big house to the little apartment, we did shed quite a bit of things that I absolutely, not only do I not miss them, it was liberating to get rid of them. It was unburdening the fact that you had all this stuff that you'd collected that you thought you needed.
I was going to say, is that liberation something you saw going in, or sort of the surprise afterwards?
Well, my wife had found a book, and I can't remember the title of the book, but it has to deal with decluttering. And some people will probably recognize when I describe it and identify what the name of the book is, if I can't think of it. But it has to deal with the things you keep are only the things that spark joy when you look at them as you're deciding what to get rid of. And we actually went through that process of, does this item spark joy? Not really. But that helped us decide what to keep and what not to keep. And that was a very helpful step going into the transition, the decluttering process. So it really wasn't a surprise that it was going to be liberating to get rid of all these things you really just don't need.
Okay. I could see that. I always say it's like you end up, and you nested for family. Most people nest for family in the house and the backyard and the school district. And it's like re-nesting, but reorganizing your life to the life that you're entering into, right?
True. And also when we had the bigger house, we had a yard to go with that. And, I bought, when we moved into this house, a 10 by 10 shed for the backyard with just a few items to put in there. I didn't really need that big of a shed. 8 years later, that thing was packed because you always need a different tool for gardening and raking and all these other things that you got to do to keep up with the house. And you think you need all these things, and you probably do at the time. But when you don't have that house anymore, you don't need all that stuff.
So you don't think I need my 4 bicycles?
You may, Roger. You may. We have 2.
I just got an e-bike and I love it, by the way. So was the book Spark Joy?
I think that's it.
By Maria Kondo?
I think that's it.
Illustrated masterclass on the art of organizing and tidying up. I don't
believe that's the one.
Book, but
I didn't read the book. My wife gave me the tips. That's all I needed, and it helped.
Very cool.
But she did the reading on that one.
So let's pivot a little bit and talk about the cost. So, the RV virus, it's one of those unique viruses, I think, in that it can be very detrimental to your financial health and social, marital health, or it can be an amazing thing depending on how you navigate it. So it's not like a virus isn't necessarily a bad thing. So any just observations of tips of how you went through your iterations of RVs so you were a good steward in how you got to where you guys are now in terms of the equipment and things like that?
Let's start with I guess the equipment is a good question to start with. And there's a couple of other ideas I'd like to throw out. The equipment thing is the first 2, we bought that pop-up camper off of Craigslist, and it was a great value. In fact, I believe I sold it for what I paid for it after using it for a year, because you can find some great values out there. And the same thing with the second was a used travel trailer that we did some research. We wanted some features on the second one. We didn't want to pay for a new one. So I did some research on Craigslist and I actually found one about 800 miles away up in Detroit and purchased that one, drove up there and pulled it back to Pennsylvania, and trading value pretty close to what I paid for it. So there's some deals out there. You can really find some, and we're talking, I think I paid $7,500 for the pop-up and $15,000 for the travel trailer. Those are not big expenditures. And we were very comfortable in the travel trailer for those 3 months, but we know we wanted to have some more items that we wanted to drag around and make it a little bit more convenient. And that's where the 5th wheel came in handy. So that would be the first thing I'd started. Is another advantage of buying a used RV is not only the cost factor of not having the initial hit on depreciation for an item like an RV, but it's also, once you get into this world, you realize RVs are not necessarily made as good as a house. But even a brand new house, we had a house built once where there's all sorts of things that have to be worked off, punch list items that are not quite right when you move into a new house. Well, the same thing with a brand new RV. So the advantage of buying a used one, maybe that's 1, 2, 3 years old, is that first owner has gone through the punch list for you and worked out some of the kinks and some of the bugs that you get with a brand new system.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's a little bit like exercise equipment. There are a lot of RVs that are very lately used, just because, when people buy them incorrectly with the intent of using them and then just can't do it. And so they end up, shedding them off.
Sure. And there are some people out there that want to do the full-time lifestyle. Maybe they're later in life and make the decision a little bit later. And unfortunately, they buy the RV, they add all sorts of upgrades to it. And then they realize, that they couldn't do this for whatever reason when the person has a health issue. And I've heard stories of people finding some great deals because of someone's unfortunate circumstances that they can't carry on the lifestyle as long as they wanted to.
Yeah.
So there's some opportunities out there as well.
Yeah. I think it would be good to buy a used RV from an engineer.
That would be a great suggestion. Great suggestion.
Very detailed. So you guys have been doing this, we'll call it 2 or 3 years. What has brought you the most joy in your estimation for you?
I'd say it's the sense of freedom that you get knowing you can go wherever you want and stay as long or as short as you want and see some amazing places. I think that's probably the thing that's really been the most rewarding about this lifestyle.
Could you speak for your wife? I know that's a dangerous thing to do, but could you?
I think we were in complete agreement with that because we talked about that quite a bit. And certainly we talked about this before we started this adventure. It's a key factor in success is having a good conversation and making sure both partners are really on board with this decision, which I think we're at the 99% point of being in sync on what we want to do and why we like this.
Well, in such close quarters, it's very easy to have little conversations.
Sure.
Right? You don't have your different spaces to run off to. You're going to be together.
True. That's true.
Right? Which is a good thing.
Right.
Any hidden treasures that you've discovered that it's okay if they're not hidden? That I've traveled a lot, but you always want to know. Somebody earlier today told me about the largest bottle of ketchup in, I think, St. Louis. Any little treasures that you willing to share that you've seen?
I think I sent you a picture once of the world's largest lobster statue up in New Brunswick, Canada.
I forgot about that.
I guess treasures I'll just say is our favorite destination. It's a place we visited before we had an RV. We would go to Maine every once in a while and stay in a bed and breakfast. And we loved it so much. We knew that when we started this adventure, that was going to be one of our first destinations. And sure enough, we were there within 2 weeks of starting full-time travel. We went up to Maine and spent 6 weeks up there and just had a blast. That is the place that I would say is the hidden treasure for those that have not been to Maine.
I've never been to Maine.
Specifically, the coast of Maine, Bar Harbor, not necessarily Bar Harbor area. If you like the tourism things, there's some tourism things to do there. But that surrounding coastline, north and south of Bar Harbor, is just beautiful scenery, and it's just a wonderful place to visit.
So just to pivot back a little bit, what is it about people that enjoy the largest lobster or the largest ketchup bottle? Why is it that we like those things so much?
Because they're unique. They're different. It's something you don't see everywhere.
It's just, I don't know. Yeah. It's just funny.
You reminded me of we were in Texas, north of Houston. No, I'm sorry. This was actually west of where you're at. There's a giant Bowie knife.
Okay.
A statue. It's about 50 miles west of Dallas.
Huh.
And I want to say, is it Bowie, Texas? I think it's in Bowie, Texas.
That would make
sense.
They
have this giant Bowie knife, and it's probably 40 feet long, if I remember correctly. And I was just fascinated. Who would make a giant statue of a Bowie knife? Well, Bowie, Texas would.
You think of it, somebody's going to do it, right?
That's right. That's right.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You're full-timers. How long do you think realistically you're going to want to do that?
That's a good question. We have a I guess you would say midterm, because it's not a long-term plan, of buying some property somewhere. We love the Wisconsin area, the Northwoods area of Wisconsin as well. I love to fish. And so we actually have looked at some areas up in Wisconsin for either buying a cabin or buying some land and building a cabin. But we're kind of torn on when are we going to do that? When are we going to pull the trigger? Because we know we are having so much fun doing this random nomadic lifestyle. And we don't want to necessarily be tied to a bricks and sticks home again but we also want to experience northern Wisconsin and being able to walk out my back door and go fishing all the time. So maybe 5 years of this and maybe buying a cabin. But given the Wisconsin winters, we will probably still travel in an RV seasonally and head south to Florida or Arizona or Texas. It gets cold. I think there will always be an RV component in our lifestyle, but we do want to buy some property at some point. And I don't know when that's going to be. It's 5 years, 3 years,
okay,
might be 10 years.
And then I think, okay, here's one last question, but then I think of another one. So you're boondocking some.
Sure.
You're very nomadic. This is full time. How do you fulfill the social and community aspect of life?
First of all, we still have connections with friends we made throughout the years. And we stay connected with them through social media, or at least through instant messaging and phone calls. You meet great friends along the way. There are some wonderful people that you meet along your travels that you establish relationships with and become friends with. I think I guess it's still family. You're still pretty close with family. That's one of the other advantages of RV travel is spending the time in the military. Rarely got the chance to go back to see family other than maybe holidays. And then there's a lot of things going on during the holidays. So you really can't spend significant quality time with them. Well, this last summer, we spent close to a month and a half near my sister, which it was the first time in 30 plus years that I really spent some really great quality time with her and her husband. And it was just being able to reconnect with them that was enabled by this lifestyle. And we'll probably go back again this next summer as well, just because that was so much fun last year.
Yeah, that's a perspective I hadn't thought of, because it's easy when, like, I have a sister in Florida and she's planted there and I'm planted here. And there's always a reason you can't go because I'm not mobile. So that's a good perspective. I get that.
And can we circle back to...
Of course. You want to go back to the big ball of string now? Or what are we going
No, I want to go back to boondocking and make sure people understand that there are different categories of boondocking. Yeah. There's boondocking, like going to a state forest or a national forest or whatever, being out in the middle of nowhere. There's Wally docking, and that's where you park in a Walmart parking lot and you're on your way from point A to point B. People do that. So sometimes you'll be in a Walmart parking lot and you'll see a couple RVs in the campground. Well, they're just pulling over for a night's rest and they're going to move on. And Walmart certainly allows that in places where you see people do that. And some cities have ordinances against that, but that's Wally docking. And then there's mooch docking, and that's where you go spend time with friends or family and stay in their driveway for a day. And my sister has mooch docking. My sister has a bit of property up in the Midwest. And so she actually wants us to come stay on her property. And she actually installed a 50 amp circuit so we can plug into have electricity, at least while we're there, if we find the need. But yeah, so there's mooch docking is a derivative of boondocking. So
lots of different categories. It's like any hobby or anything you do, there's so much more to it than you realize once you get into it. What do you do if you're early in this journey? I mean, obviously you were early in this journey at some point. Yeah. How do you start to learn from others? Well,
I mentioned the story of our first trip where I caught the virus, and within weeks of that first trip, I started doing research on, really it was about boondocking, but that led to other, discovery of new information about RV travel and in particular full-time RV travel. And we're the beneficiary of others that have done this before and documented their lessons learned. And one of the first places I've discovered actually has turned into the most helpful resource was a website called RVDreams.com. So that's RV-dreams.com. And it's a website and really a blog and a website with a bunch of helpful resources put together by a couple who started this when they were in their early 40s. In fact, I think they were 40, walked away from successful careers. He was, I believe, a real estate attorney, and she managed some office for a real estate firm, I believe. And they walked away from that completely at age 40 and started full-time RV travel because they wanted to. And they were not wealthy. They didn't have this big pile of cash to start out. And they documented every detail about what they learned along the way, to include detailed budgets and expenses, expense reports, spreadsheets for every year they've been doing this. And they got such incredible feedback from people that were following their blog. They actually started a thing called educational rallies that they do twice a year, where you go hang out with them in a campground for a week, and you don't have to have an RV. You can stay at a nearby hotel. And they actually kind of walk you through, in a 5-day period, what they learned along the way. And that was the most helpful thing for us, was not only their website, but this educational rally that they hosted. And it really took away a giant part of the mystery and the apprehension about doing this that has allowed us to really maximize our enjoyment of this lifestyle.
Howard and Linda.
Howard and Linda Payne.
RV-dreams.com.
Correct. And we've stayed in contact. I'll add this part. We actually had signed up to do their rally 2 years before we started this adventure. And because of the military commitments kept getting in the way, I had to keep canceling. And they were kind enough to kind of push our reservation from spring to fall, and then from fall to spring. Then that 2 years later, we finally made it. And that was actually after we'd started this adventure. But because of all the great information on their website, I think I'd probably, been on their website 100 times and gleaned just about everything I needed to know from the rally. But it was still helpful to go to the rally and actually talk to people that were doing this and ask detailed questions about what they've learned along the way. Great people.
Now you get to be that person in some way, at least on this show. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Roger.
So, Nicole, tell me what you think of Chuck Norris.
I can't.
If you don't know, we are here in the Happy Lab, where we just noodle on how being happy. And if you want to make yourself smile, ask Nicole what she thinks about Chuck Norris.
Okay, he was very hairy. I just saw the Bruce Lee Chuck Norris famous fight scene for, was it Enter the Dragon? And he was just very, shockingly so, fur. Why are we talking about this? We were talking about this before he turned the microphones back on.
So come on, it's good to be silly, and I would never tell Chuck Norris that, but he's awesome. We were actually, the way this came up is we were thinking about doing Chuck Norris jokes, and then we got sidetracked. So hopefully this made you happy. It definitely made me happy watching Nicole vent a little bit. Okay, let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
In the next 7 days, take a little baby step, just one step towards rocking retirement. So if you think you might be succumbing to this RV virus.
Crying? You look like you have tears in your eyes.
I am still crying from laughing at you, yes. Come on, we're serious here. We're taking smart sprints. So if you think you might be succumbing to the RV virus, that is totally fine, because if you manage this virus, it can create a great retirement. But I want you to take a step today of starting to get a little bit more intentional about counting the cost. So you are intentional about this decision. Maybe it's creating a spreadsheet, starting to do a little bit of research so you can make sure you're being a good steward of your, not just your life, but your finances. So that's your step for today. So go do it. On a related note, Nicole, much less hairier man, Bruce Lee. If you want to see something, you said your son was watching Bruce Lee. If you Google Bruce Lee ping pong, there's a video of Bruce Lee playing ping pong with nunchucks.
Really? Oh, Archer would be all over that.
He's not just hitting it back barely. He is like full born, flying all over the place. So Google Bruce Lee ping pong. It's an amazing video. I'm assuming it's real. It's a little grainy. It's amazing. But until then, we're so glad you like to listen to us. We love talking with you every week. You have a great week, okay?
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.